What happens when a beloved British actor sits down for what should be a friendly morning chat show interview only to face the most shocking ambush of his career? In just 42 seconds, one host's outrageous comment would destroy years of professional courtesy and send one of Britain's most respected actors storming off set in absolute fury. The morning began with calm professionalism, the kind that comes from decades of on-air experience. But within minutes, the entire atmosphere of the Loose Women studio would collapse under the weight of one host's unexpected hostility. Colin Firth entered the brightly lit set with the refined confidence and modest smile he had become known for. Dressed in his signature dark suit and offering polite nods to the panel and crew, he seemed genuinely pleased to be there. Ruth Langsford greeted him warmly from the center seat, thanking him for joining them. Colin adjusted his jacket, smiled kindly, and returned her greeting with quiet sincerity. He seemed ready for a typical morning talk show interview. Pleasant, light-hearted, promotional. Nadia Sawalha leaned forward with enthusiasm, praising his career and noting how he consistently selected deep, layered roles that resonated emotionally with audiences. Colin responded thoughtfully, speaking about storytelling and his fascination with portraying characters who faced moral dilemmas and emotional struggles. Jane Moore nodded approvingly, jotting down a few notes as she prepared her next question. Everything was flowing smoothly, the studio warm with friendly conversation and admiration. But on the far left, Carol McGiffin sat with folded arms, her eyes fixed on Colin with attention that didn't match the room. She hadn't spoken yet, but her smirk and posture hinted at something sharp and confrontational, bubbling beneath the surface. While the others were engaged in cheerful dialogue, Carol seemed to be waiting for the exact moment to strike. Colin continued answering a question about his new film when Carol suddenly leaned forward. Her voice cut clean through the comfortable atmosphere. "Speaking of authentic," she said, her tone edged with something far from friendly, "I have to ask about something that's been bothering me, Colin." The shift was immediate and jarring. Ruth's smile faltered. "Carol, we discussed the topics beforehand," she said softly, trying to keep the peace. Carol waved her hand dismissively, eyes locked on Colin like a predator zeroing in on prey. "Oh, come on, Ruth. The viewers deserve honesty, not promotional fluff." Colin maintained his calm expression, though he clearly registered the sudden turn. "What exactly has been bothering you?" he asked politely. Carol leaned forward, ready to ignite the first spark in what would become one of the most explosive interviews daytime television had ever seen. What happens when a beloved British actor sits down for what should be a friendly morning chat show interview only to face the most shocking ambush of his career? That was the question, hanging in the air as Carol McGiffin prepared to deliver the first strike. The energy in the studio shifted so suddenly that even the floor crew paused, sensing the tension thickening around the guest chair. Colin, still composed, waited for Carol's clarification, unaware of just how personal and intense her attack was about to become. Carol's eyes narrowed as she leaned in, her voice carrying an unmistakable sharpness. "Well," she began with an icy smile, "it's just that you actors, especially you posh British types, pretend to be so noble and artistic. But really, you're just privileged men playing dress up for millions of pounds." The studio dropped into a heavy silence. Nadia's face froze in disbelief. Jane's pen halted midair. Ruth looked horrified, already regretting whatever freedom she had granted Carol before the show. Colin blinked slowly, not out of confusion, but in measured shock. "I'm sorry," he said evenly. "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." His voice remained calm, but the tension in his jaw suggested he understood perfectly. He was being ambushed. "Oh, I think you do," Carol continued, emboldened by the attention. "You went to fancy schools. You had every advantage in life. And now you sit here talking about the human condition, like you've ever faced real struggle." Nadia quickly attempted to intervene. "Carol, that's not fair." Carol snapped toward her. "Fair? What's not fair is pretending these people are special when they've never worked a real day in their lives." Colin's expression tightened, though he maintained his composure. "I think you're making some assumptions about my life that aren't accurate." Carol let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, please, spare us the humble act. You're Colin Firth. You've probably never even taken a bus." Ruth cleared her throat, her voice trembling. Let's return to the film. Carol cut her off sharply. No, our viewers deserve real talk. I want Colin to explain why he thinks he deserves obscene amounts of money for pretending to be other people. The words landed like a slap. This time Colin's politeness wavered. His grip tightened on the armrests. I've never claimed to deserve anything more than anyone else. Carol leaned back with false innocence. Your craft? My hairdresser works harder than you. Jane stepped in, voice firm. Carol, this is inappropriate. But Carol only smirked, readying herself for the next blow, unaware she was pushing the interview and herself toward total collapse. What happens when a beloved British actor sits down for what should be a friendly morning chat show? Interview only to face the most shocking ambush of his career? By now, the studio atmosphere had turned completely tense, almost electric. Colin Firth, long admired for his grace and patience, had maintained composure under Carol McGiffin's relentless attack. But even he could feel the limits of polite restraint approaching. Every glance from Carol seemed calculated, every word measured to provoke, to unsettle, and to expose him to criticism that had little to do with his film and everything to do with personal assumptions about his life. Carol leaned in, eyes glinting with triumph. You know what I find most offensive about actors like you, Colin? She said, her voice rising. You take roles away from working-class actors who actually understand struggle. And then you have the audacity to play characters supposed to represent ordinary people. The statement reverberated through the studio. Nadia gasped audibly. Jane dropped her pen. Ruth's hands went to her face, a silent plea for intervention. Colin's jaw tightened, his face growing stern. But his voice remained controlled. That's an interesting perspective, Carol, but I think you're oversimplifying how casting works. Carol shot back immediately. Am I? Because last I checked, when directors want someone to play a struggling father or a man facing hardship, they don't go looking in the local job center. They call someone like you, who's never missed a meal or worried about paying rent. Her words were sharp, pointed, and cruel. Colin shifted in his chair, now leaning forward slightly, the polite actor's mask beginning to crack. I am privileged, he said finally, voice firm but steady. I am privileged to work in a profession I love, surrounded by talented people. But privilege does not disqualify someone from telling meaningful stories. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. What I find offensive is your assumption that privilege somehow negates dedication, experience, or integrity. Nadia tried to speak. Maybe we should all take a step back. No, Colin interrupted, his politeness finally gone. I've listened politely to your attacks on my character, my background, and my profession. I won't sit here and let you diminish the work of thousands of dedicated professionals who strive to create something meaningful. His gaze locked onto Carol's, icy and unwavering. You seem to think attacking a guest makes you a champion of ordinary people. It doesn't. It makes you cruel. Carol's face flushed, the first cracks appearing in her confident facade. She tried to regain calm. The other panelists were frozen. Nadia's tears glistened in her eyes. Jane stared at her notes in disbelief. Ruth's hands trembled. Carol's smirk faltered for the first time. The power shift in the studio was palpable. Colin's measured steps toward the exit echoed like the final note of a dramatic symphony. What happens when a beloved British actor sits down for what should be a friendly morning chat show? Interview only to face the most shocking ambush of his career? Colin Firth's exit from the Loose Women's set marked the dramatic conclusion of what would quickly become one of the most infamous moments in British daytime television history. The once lively, welcoming studio now felt like a room frozen in shock, the air thick with tension and disbelief. Every crew member, every camera operator, and every presenter could feel the weight of what had just occurred. What was meant to be a routine promotional interview had transformed into a public confrontation that no one could have anticipated. Carol McGiffin stood rigid, her face flushed from a combination of anger, embarrassment, and dawning realization. For the first time, she seemed genuinely unsettled, unsure of how to recover from the professional disaster she had orchestrated. Ruth Langsford, usually composed and diplomatic, leaned forward with her head in her hands, clearly mortified. Nadia Sawala's eyes glistened with tears, a mixture of shock and regret, while Jane more simply stared at her, notepad as if the answers to Life's great mysteries might be written there. The studio, once bright and welcoming, had become a silent witness to the fallout of uncontrolled aggression. Colin paused at the edge of the set, looking back once more at the panel. His expression combined disappointment and unwavering resolve. "I'm walking away from your behavior," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the lingering silence. "I came here to discuss a project I believe in, created by talented professionals who deserve respect. What I experienced today was neither professional nor constructive. It was cruel." With those words, he turned toward the corridor, his footsteps echoing in the studio, signaling a definitive end to the interview. The moment was final, the power of his composed response leaving an undeniable mark. The camera operators and production crew, long accustomed to live television chaos, were momentarily paralyzed. Viewers at home would soon witness the clip of Carol McGiffin being silenced by a level of calm authority she had clearly underestimated. The incident would dominate social media, ignite debates about professional conduct. As Colin disappeared down the corridor, the studio began to stir. Carol's expression shifted rapidly, first disbelief, then anger, and finally, a sense of stunned realization at how badly she had mishandled the situation. Ruth attempted to salvage some decorum, offering quiet reassurances to the other panelists. Nadia wiped her tears, and Jane slowly looked up from her notes, collectively processing the dramatic unraveling of what had been intended as a simple interview. By the time the cameras went off, the room had been left in disarray, a cautionary tale in real time about respect, assumptions, and the consequences of unrestrained hostility on live television.